All right, chapter 23, Two Stories. Kahiri wiped the tears from his eyes and the snot from his nose as he walked the curving road to Manu's house. His mother had been angry. He slipped away, knowing it would make her even angrier, but he had made a promise, and he was going to try to keep it. He flipped Drew's coin into the air once, twice. It fell in his palm with a light tap. It was heavier than a 50 pesos coin, but about the same size. This coin was from another time, and only Manu still told stories that stretched so far back. He came to a small house with faded green paint. He pushed open the wobbly gate and went up to the veranda, where an old man sat in a rocking chair carving a small figure. "Mema wo aha Kahiri," the man said. "Agya mema wo aha," Kahiri said. He sat on the floor in front of the rocking chair and watched Manu dig the tip of the knife into the wood with quick twists. When he stopped and blew off the dust, he had carved one eye on the little figure. He turned it to Kahiri. "What can I do for you?" Manu asked in soft Twi. Kahiri flipped the coin to Manu. "I will tell you a story," he said, "and then you will tell me one." Manu squinted at the coin and then at Kahiri. "All right," he said. "Begin." Chapter 24, In a Fine Castle. Corinne pulled everyone under the broken stairs and looked through the cracks as Ma Dusily and the two men searched all 3 levels of the castle. They hung on to thick posts as they waited. "He told on us," Buki said. "How would they know to look here?" "There's nowhere else to hide," Corinne said. "We can't stay in the water," Drew added. Malik pointed to a seawall against the castle that was broken in one spot like a chipped tooth. The crack was low enough for them to pull themselves over. He took a gulp of air and swam the entire length to the wall, resurfacing just as Ma Dusily arrived and looked out at the water. If she looked straight down, she would see him. Corinne ducked behind the posts with the others, but she felt as if someone was squeezing her heart in a vice. A few moments later, Ma Dusily motioned to the men in another part of the castle, and she moved on. Malik flashed his smile across the waves and gave a thumbs up. Corinne, Buki, and Drew met him at the wall. They waited until they could no longer hear the crunch of footsteps before they pulled themselves through the crack. The castle was a mottled combination of dirty white paint and sandy-colored patches where the paint had peeled off, revealing the raw, crumbling stone underneath. Lines of mold and rot expanded cracks and colored some surfaces shades of poisonous-looking black and green. The walls, the floors, the ceiling. Everything was solid, as if the castle had been carved from one boulder. And every level of the castle had a terrace that overlooked the water, where dozens of black cannons peered over the sea like the eyes of an all-seeing monster. There was a nearby alcove partly filled with heavy black cannonballs. The 4 of them jammed inside, trying to keep out of sight. But it was not long before their backs ached and their muscles felt stiff. Someone's stomach growled and Corinne's muscles tightened. "Stop breathing on me," Buki complained. "What would you like me to do?" Corinne whispered. "Hold my breath? Try it. Maybe some of that Jumbies stuff will kick in." Corinne pinched what she thought was Buki's arm, but Drew yelped. "Sorry," Corinne said. "Maybe you should say that to Malik," Drew retorted. "Shh," Malik said. Drew moved a leg, and they all tumbled out of the space and then scrambled back. "We can't stay here all day," she whined. "You all should go back to the mermaids," Corinne said. "I will talk to Ma Dusily alone." Buki rolled his eyes. "This again." "You don't want to be around a Jumbie, so go," Corinne said. "Nobody is keeping you here." "But you brought us," Buki said. "We wouldn't be here if you hadn't thought of us. And why did you, anyway?" Corinne bit her lip. "Because I couldn't do it without you," she said. "I knew I couldn't." Buki looked genuinely sorry. Drew gave Corinne a sideways smile and Malik winked. "Anyway, Drew's right," Corinne said. "We can't stay here." "Well, we got dragged across the whole ocean," Buki said, "so we're not doing anything alone." Malik ventured onto the landing. He stayed low until he reached a set of stairs. He called his friends over with one finger. Beyond them was an open courtyard. There were stairs on both sides. Facing the sea side were the cannons, each with a pyramid of stacked cannonballs, and at the back were rooms with peeling, faded blue doors. Ma, Destiny, and the two men were already searching the next level up. Malik dashed across the courtyard and pulled at one of the doors. A large iron latch stuck on the clasp, so he had to pull a few times to get it open. The door screeched on its hinges. He cringed and opened it just wide enough for everyone to squeeze through. From a crack in the door, they saw Ma Destiny appear on one set of stairs and the two men on the other. They searched down into the courtyard. Malik tapped Corinne on the shoulder and made a motion across his chest with his hand. Buki chuckled. "What is it?" Drew whispered. "She has the stone on her." "Look," Corinne said. Ma Destiny was wearing the same white dress from before, but there was a bag hung across her chest from her shoulder to her hip. Inside was something lumpish and heavy-looking. Ma Destiny kept one hand firmly on the strap as she called instructions to the two men. "Do you really think?" Drew began. "What better way to keep it safe than to have it on you where you can be sure no one will take it?" Buki said. He turned to Corinne and pointed at her necklace. "Isn't that where you keep your most prized possessions? Where you can touch it?" Drew sighed. "That means it's going to be even harder to get." "This is when it's helpful to know a couple of thieves," said Buki. Malik rubbed his palms together, and Buki stretched his fingers. "This is going to be difficult, brother," he said, "but not impossible." Malik screwed up his lips. "Well, maybe it will be very close to impossible, but there is a sliver of hope." Malik arched an eyebrow. "A very, very, very thin sliver." "So what's the plan?" Drew asked. "You approve of thieving now?" Buki asked, smiling. "This is different," Drew said. "We have to get the stone. Otherwise, right, the missing children. But we are also children, and there are more of us than there are ones missing back home." Malik jabbed Buki with an elbow, that we know of. "And it would be simpler to cut our losses and go." "But then you wouldn't get to show us your excellent thieving skills," Corinne pointed out. "True," Buki said. He lifted his chin and smirked. Malik and Buki went to work in a corner of the room covered in a thin layer of sand that had blown in from the beach. They drew up a first draft of their plan, wiped it away, and drew again. The room was dark except for slivers of light that came in through windows too high to see out of. There were no glass panes, so sand from the beach had settled in thin, uneven layers that crunched under their feet. Against the walls were long, dark stains taller than Corinne. In a few places there were etched markings that looked like someone had made them with the sharp edge of a stone, but she didn't know what they said. Some of the etchings were only a series of straight lines. Those Corinne understood. Whoever had made them was counting. In one spot there were 33. What were they counting, she wondered? People? Meals? Days? Weeks? She saw a length of chain in one corner, and the memory of the chains on the ship came straight at her like an arrow. The chain was heavy, almost too heavy for her to pick up, but she did, feeling the weight against her hand. "Were the mermaids here?" Drew asked. "They were girls once," Corinne said, "and they were chained on that ship. Maybe they were here first." Corinne's stomach soured and her throat tightened. "What is this place?" Drew asked.